demigod who eclipsed all lesser mortals. Our land stands aloof like a rock in the ocean of bourgeois states. Wave after wave crashes against it, threatening to destroy it. But the rock stands firm. Alexander Bolshagovsky recalls one such screening for Stalin. Stalin and the members of the Politburo were watching a screening of this film about the building of socialism with the Minister of Cinematography. After the third reel, Stalin rises abruptly from his chair, says nothing and walks out of the screening room, and the Minister of Cinematography leaps to his feet in concern. Beria then confronts him, shouting, "You dog, you swine, I'll crush you. You'll be my janitor." And then Beria spells out the crux of the problem. "Don't you understand, you fool, that there cannot be two suns in the sky, there can only be one." Now Lenin vanishes from history. It was Stalin alone who led the revolution. Soon, with the help of film magic, Stalin again evolves. He becomes a demigod. Here in this bedroom scene, a mother-to-be describes her beatific dream of Stalin to her husband, while avid moviegoers drink in her words. "Our son will be a good, kind, sturdy boy, and when he grows up, he will be a communist. Stalin will invite him to the Kremlin and say to him, 'Vasily Gerasimovich, I am sending you to England because it is time to start collective farms there.'" Life in much of the Soviet Union is a primitive struggle to survive. Except in Stalin's dream factory, where happy shoppers luxuriate in the good life, and where for an hour the audience can share their make-believe affluence. A similar projectionist, Ganshin, was the man who previewed these films for Stalin. He didn't watch films for his pleasure, just to see what films were being produced. If the picture were politically sensitive, he would give orders for corrections. In a masterful stroke of propaganda, Stalin now innovates a foolproof method of setting up his potential enemies for liquidation. He begins by manipulating the nation's frame of mind. At Stalin's orders, every Soviet medium sets off a great clamor of phony spy and saboteur alarms. Children help catch spy. Saboteurs tried to wreck train. Cursed traitors of the motherland. Trust no one, the media trumpets. Your husband, your wife, your brother could be a capitalist spy. The Soviet cinema outdoes all other media with a virtual spy and saboteur festival. It works. Stalin has only to frame and then accuse his enemies of espionage, and the angry mob calls for their blood. Our enemies want to tear our young Soviet Republic to shreds. But we have the NKVD, our secret police. Long live our beloved friend and leader, Comrade Stalin. Stalin's deification is a process to which every writer, painter, musician, and actor must contribute, or else. Actor Alexei Diki has been serving a prison term in the Gulag. But Stalin is so impressed with the actor's commanding stage presence that he paroles him. He performs, paradoxically, the role of his own jailer, the General Secretary of the Communist Party, Stalin. The film is one more brushstroke on the great canvas that Stalin is painting to correct the mistakes of history. On one occasion, Stalin, the master illusionist, plays himself. It is late autumn of 1941. Hitler's army is within 20 kilometers of the Kremlin. Nevertheless, Stalin decides to stage the traditional Red Square military parade, celebrating the October Revolution. For security reasons, the schedule has been changed, and unaware of this, the camera crew arrives too late to film Stalin's speech to the ranks, and barely in time to record the last battalions marching off to war in the falling snow. However, when the film is released, Stalin is there, exhorting his troops. The error had been remedied that same night, inside the Kremlin, when Stalin, on a mock-up of the Red Square Mausoleum, reenacted himself addressing the marchers. Few viewers will notice that his breath is not frosty, nor is snow falling. The terrified camera crew had needed several takes to get it right, much to Stalin's annoyance. The filming had not gone altogether smoothly. Indoctrination of the Red Army with the Stalin myth requires little finesse. The troops are marched into the cinema and voila, it is done. As the myth of his divinity takes hold, Stalin himself seems to undergo a transformation. In his speeches, he begins referring to himself not as I, but as Stalin, as if to say that the real Stalin is an invisible, benevolent, and all-pervasive force. The force of which the mustachioed man on the podium is but one aspect. The attraction of this idea is irresistible. In the eyes of his people, Stalin has become a god. Not everyone believes in the deification of Joseph Stalin. Boris Pilniak, a writer, publishes a novel in which a party leader schemes with a surgeon to murder a political rival on the operating table. The parallel is blindingly obvious. Mikhail Frunze, a promising young leader, had died undergoing surgery at Stalin's suggestion. His crime had been simply that he was too popular. Behind his mask, Stalin is enraged. He will take revenge 10 years later, when memory of Pilniak's novel has faded. Pilniak is then shot. From this moment forward, Stalin has a score to settle with Soviet literature. Now, every work of every writer will be developed under party scrutiny. Soviet literature enters a long, dark night, from which it will never emerge. Henceforth, writers will write for a readership of one, Stalin. The pressure mounts, and the poet Vladimir Mayakovsky takes his own life. The poet Sergei Yesenin also commits suicide. His works are banned. The novelist Bulgakov is barred by Stalin from fleeing Russia, and his books never see print. Stalin sets out to make Soviet literature as effective a mind control instrument as the cinema. But he needs a sacred cow, someone to front for him. Maxim Gorky would do nicely. At the turn of the century, his novels and plays brought him acclaim. But Gorky is sulking in Italy in self-imposed exile. Stalin settles on Gorky, but how to lure him back? Stalin makes him an offer he cannot refuse: fame and power. Gorky arrives and is greeted like the prodigal son. The celebrated author is appointed by order of Stalin to head up the newly formed Union of Soviet Writers. Gorky is to preside over their first Congress. Gorky advises his nervous audience, the enemy who does not give up is exterminated. Duped by Stalin and Henryk Yagoda, head of the secret police, Gorky unknowingly perpetrates a fraud on his fellow authors. He organizes an expedition of writers to visit the White Sea-Baltic Canal, being built on the backs of thousands of prisoners, all furnished by Stalin's secret police. It is a triumph of socialism, Gorky explains. Labor sets the prisoner free. The writers are to glorify it. Writer Yevgeny Gavrilovich was there.
I remember that they got us together, a whole train full of writers, and off we went to the White Sea-Baltic Canal, named after Stalin. The canal was being built by prisoners, dressed up specially for our benefit. Looking back, I realized this performance had all been staged. Our role as writers was to conceal from the world the existence of the repressive machine that had a stranglehold on the country.
All contact between the prisoners and the writers is carefully orchestrated. The prisoners have been advised that the slightest flaw in their performance will be swiftly followed by their execution.
When I recollect all that was really happening then, I'm amazed at my naivety. We were really such blind idiots. Just think about the tremendous impact this kind of mass propaganda had on the destiny of humanity and the state. This was proven true in my century.
After the sightseeing, folk dances. The secret police deception is so impressive that the zealous and gullible writers who arrive prepared to accept whatever they are shown believe the pathetic charade and collaborate on a book of high praise, exalting the wisdom of Stalin, the excellence of the secret police, and the justice and decency of the Soviet penal system. Why did some of the greatest names in Soviet literature suddenly leap into Stalin's arms? For one thing, fear. They had just witnessed the fate that would otherwise be theirs. Writer Tamara Ivanova.
The times were so bad then, but now it's almost impossible to understand how we survived all of that. I remember that in the house opposite the Tretiakov picture gallery where we lived, we had no garbage chutes then. In the elevators and entrances there were notices asking the residents not to flush burnt papers down the toilet because everyone was burning their archives.
Using Maxim Gorky as bait, Stalin now beams his mind control apparat westward. He suggests to the gullible Gorky that he invites some of the West's most prestigious writers to come and see for themselves this brave new world of socialism. George Bernard Shaw arrives. Romain Rolland, H.G. Wells, Henri Barbusse, André Gide, all receive a hero's welcome, are stuffed with food and misinformation. They are shown the grandiose facade of communism, but not its shabby underside. And always at their elbow, the secret police. Henri Barbusse goes home and dedicates a book to Stalin. Romain Rolland reports himself satisfied. Shaw eulogizes Stalin. The German author Leon Feuchtwanger has high praise for Stalin.
You asked me about my impression after a meeting with Stalin. My first impression was the unusual simplicity of Stalin. He has humor and responds to humor. You can understand why the people not only respect but love him. He really is a man of the people, sprung from the people, a real representative of the 170 million Soviets. No poet could create a better man.
But for every Feuchtwanger, there is a Soviet writer who doubts. And of these courageous dissenters, Stalin makes a frightening example. I am paralyzed and absolutely helpless, writes poet Nikolai Klyev from the Gulag, and suffer terrible loneliness. He is then shot. Gorky's one-time friend, Ishak Barbel, a writer, shot. A young poet, Boris Kornilov, shot. His wife, Olga Bergos, a poet, is imprisoned and miscarries. Now she will never bear children.
I'm crushed, crippled. Why did they torture me? They took out my soul, searched it with their stinking fingers, spat into it, then stuck it back and said, go and live.
Gorky addresses his anxious writers. He informs them that the government has given them everything and deprived them of only one thing, the right to compose their work poorly. To write poorly, he suggests, is not to praise Stalin or his works. Ignore this at your peril, Gorky advises them. More than half of his audience will eventually be shot. In defiance, a protest poem is written in great secrecy. We exist without sensing our country beneath us. 10 steps away, our words can't be heard. But where there are enough of us for half a conversation, they always commemorate the Kremlin mountaineer. His fat fingers slimy as worms, his words dependable as waste. Stalin ferrets out the author and takes hideous revenge on Osip Mandelstam, one of Russia's greatest 20th century poets. The frightened Mandelstam is forced to write a panegyric to Stalin. The sick old poet produces a complimentary poem. Stalin then sentences him to a lingering and painful death. He is declared an enemy of the people and sent to rot in the gulags, where he goes insane, dies, and is buried in a mass grave. The strongest minds in Soviet literature bend to Stalin's will. Standing like sentinels at Stalin's portrait, writer Mikhail Zoschenko and future Nobel Prize winner Boris Pasternak pay him homage. Stalin is a masterful manipulator of his image makers. For the sycophants, there is praise, privilege, celebrity, and awards of money, country villas, and trips abroad. But best of all, momentary immunity. An ardent Stalinist, Alexander Faddeev, replaces Maxim Gorky, who dies mysteriously. Stalin forces Faddeev to pass judgment on his fellows. This writer will live, that writer will die, and the other will go to the gulags. It haunts his soul, and Faddeev kills himself, leaving a note, "I have no strength to live," as art is destroyed and cannot be rebuilt. Stalin, having demonstrated that the sword is mightier than the pen, sets out to perfect the myth-making device favored by every tyrant since the time of Nero, the spectacle. Writer Lev Razgon. Stalin loved spectacles. Well, all dictators are extremely fond of spectacles. But Stalin loved not just ordinary spectacles. He loved spectacles involving masses of people. The people were supposed to demonstrate social uniformity. Thousands of people, all doing exactly the same thing at the same time, all acting as one. You see, our clever organizers knew how to please Stalin by using people as constructions, turning them into complicated structures in which a man was just a nut and bolt of construction material. It was all part of Stalin's system of mind control, which was brought to perfection. One of the men who creates these spectacles for Stalin is Vsevolod Meyerholt. He is an avant-garde stage director with an international reputation. But Stalin, who enforces blind obedience by punishing the innocent as well as the guilty, chooses to make an example of the blameless Meyerholt. He is imprisoned in the grim Lubyanka and tortured. In a letter to the government, he writes, "I, an old man, was beaten on my back and feet with a rubber hose. Lying face down on the floor, I writhed and screamed like a whipped dog." But Stalin is unmoved and orders the old man shot. He is buried in a mass grave. The inscription reads, "Common grave, number 1. Unclaimed remains." Soon after, his widow, the actress Zinaida Reich, is brutally murdered in her apartment, tortured, her eyes gouged out. The mistress of secret police chief Lavrenti Beria then gets the apartment. Andrei Zhdanov, a passionate Stalinist, is now made Stalin's propaganda chief and given charge of all means of mass persuasion, press, radio, cinema, music, and the performing arts. Resembling a pudgy Hitler, Zhdanov comes on strong as the final authority on every minute detail of communication and the arts. He excels at snide phrase-making, servility before the West, homeless cosmopolite, bourgeois aesthete, formalist. He edits the great composer Shostakovich, denounces the brilliant composer Prokofiev. In a special resolution on cinema, he attacks the work of world-renowned Sergei Eisenstein. The director's film, Ivan the Terrible, is seen by Stalin as a metaphor for his own brutal regime. He bans it. Out of favor with Stalin, Eisenstein dies, famous but destroyed. The prophecy uttered by the opera basso Fyodor Shaliapin after encountering Stalin in the Kremlin now comes to pass. The temple of Christ the Savior, symbol of Russian greatness, is dynamited by order of Stalin. In its place, Stalin plans to erect the Palace of the Soviets, a monument to his own greatness. But nature rebels. Like an omen, the massive new foundations sink into Mother Russia's earth. The architects are imprisoned and shot, and the intelligentsia made to clear away the rubble. The project is abandoned. Stalin has indeed created a symbol of his empire, a prophetic one. His experiment in mind control a success, Stalin now has what he desires, an Orwellian nation of idol worshippers. They are ringed by his images, cut off from every outside influence, told in words, repeated and repeated, that Stalin is good, Stalin is great, Stalin loves them, Stalin stands between them and those who would usurp their freedom. Stalin is the source and the provider of all things good. Stalin is godlike in his strength and wisdom, and all nations tremble at his feet. When a fugitive, pursued by his enemies, comes again to this sorrowful land, and when through pitch-black darkness he sees by chance the sun, then the clouds oppressing his soul seem scattered by the rays of the sun, and hope in full voice begins to speak, stirring and waking his heart anew. Then the poet's soul surges. The young Georgian who penned this ode to freedom wished to become a writer, but he failed. His name was Joseph Jugashvili, later Joseph Stalin, and he became a god instead. 40 years will pass from the day of Stalin's death,